Taxidermy and inventor of the warbird series of Indian faces. The warbird faces are compressed profiles sculpted from photographs of real Native American people, as well as some animals. They are designed to mount the wing and or the tail of any medium to large bird. They also can be used in habitat work, Indian crafts, Southwest decor, and even on the backs of pedestals. In this video, part 1, I will demonstrate how I skin and mount the wing of a turkey to be used in a completed warbird. I'd like to demonstrate what I call a tube method for skinning and mounting of a turkey wing. I like to use a little borax, and it starts a preservation process. I'm using a fish skinning knife. Try to use your fingers as much as possible to keep from cutting holes in the skin. And you shove your fingers down in there to separate. Kind of reminds me of my last doctor's appointment. Right now we're down around the elbow. Now there's a lot of small feathers on the underside of the wing, which I like to remove. They just kind of get in the way. Little feathers do get in the way during the assembly process when the wing is mounted to the mounting block. We're going to invert this skin up to about this area. This is the wrist area. What we're going to do is we're going to cut loose all the secondary feather from the bone. Separate the meat from the flight feathers with a shallow cut. And now we separate the secondaries from this bone. You can see the secondary roots being exposed right here. Again, I like to use a fish skinning knife to separate those roots right down to the wrist area. And this is the wrist area. We're going to eliminate all the meat from there out. I've made a tool, it's an old fish skinning knife, and I've cut a notch in it, much like the Indians used for shaft scrapers, and I use this as a bone scraper. It helps it helps strip off the meat from the bones. In this tube process, this humerus bone is eliminated. Also, we only need one of these bones to zip tie the mounting wire to. So I'll save the largest one. Ordinarily, on mounting a bird, these secondary feathers are not separated from this bone. But since we have them so easily exposed, now is a good opportunity to go to the wire wheel and clean up this area. The wire wheel will also help separate these secondary roots and allow our glue to get down into there. I like to use a good dry preservative. I like Best Made real well. I like to rub this back into the wing, into the skin on the wing. It helps in the drying on the outside. And then the inside of the wing, here's where we degrease it on the wheel. There really isn't much grease in a wing. I'll reapply preservative. Borax will work just fine. Make sure you get it in between all the roots. Invert the tube back around the bone. Now this wing still has this shoulder pocket of feathers on. That is not needed, so I will cut those off. Now I will inject the wrist area with a wing leg preservative. I have my own recipe, and this is a saturated solution of borax in a 1-to-1 mixture with formalin. I like to include about a teaspoonful of zinc sulfate for accelerated drying, and also a little red dye. The red dye helps me to make sure that I have the entire area injected. It will not come out through the feathers unless there's a hole. Little massage gets that preservative distributed. Don't forget to inject the thumb area, as there's a little bit of tissue in there. I also like to drop a little onto this feather pad at the very back of the wing. You can see the pink. It helps accelerate the drying of that area. Now I'm going to use a wire, about a 10-inch, 10-gauge wire, sharpened at one end. This is inserted at the wrist area, just under the ligaments at that wrist. And it'll be inserted right up to this joint. You can kind of feel it with your thumb as it goes in. Just try not to poke it through the skin. And then I'll bend it down a little bit for the contour of my face. Now the face, the idea of this warbird is to make a headdress, a war bonnet, look for your Indian face. So the war bonnet, these secondary feathers I like to have come down off the bottom of the Indian's face. The top primaries shouldn't stick straight up, but follow the contour of the Indian's forehead. Then I like to zip tie the wire to the bone. You can nip off any excess wire. Now we're ready to do the mounting of the wing. The inside of the wing, where the secondary quill roots are, will be covered with a layer of silicone. I've also used power grab, even a layer of Bondo. A slow set Bondo will work. The Bondo is kind of messy, and if it sets up on you, if it kicks off too fast, you've got quite a mess. Now we're going to use the silicone. Try not to get any on the feathers. I start clear up at the wrist, down to the bottom of the wing. So I like to use a little denatured alcohol. I use this, a little bit of this on top of the silicone in order for me to use a spatula that won't stick to the silicone, and I can flatten that silicone down onto those wing, on those secondary roots. The denatured alcohol is also a preservative. Now we're going to mix up the mache. I'm using the antler set mache from Mackenzie's this morning. First thing I'm going to do is add a cap full of Odoban. And this is a mildew stat sanitizer. The reason I'm adding this is, it is optional. Occasionally, the birds will be mounted in a moist environment, and the mache that's inside won't dry out quite as fast as it should, and a little mold sometimes starts on the inside. Once it dries completely, it's never a problem. With this mache, we're going to stuff this wing pocket full. In fact, we're going to overstuff it. And that'll be apparent in just a minute or two. To get it all the way up to the front. Now once our mache is put inside the wing. I'll staple shut this wing pocket. Any excess skin will be trimmed off. Now with that wing pocket full of mache, now we mount the wing. Hold these secondaries down and we use the face to mold the mache. I like to clamp the wrist area to the forehead, and then I like to clamp the secondaries to the lower chin area. Then with our pointer board, I flatten out the mache. I use the pointer board to tell me where the tips of the feathers are, or where they will be in relation to my wall level when the final bird is completed. Mache sets up, this wing will fit right back into that face. Now that the mache has set, I'll remove the wing from the face. Prior to flipping it over and carding it, I do sometimes, and this is an optional step, I like to take a knife and slice open the skin, just to allow a little ventilation and allow the water to evaporate from the mache inside of the wing. This can be, when it's completely dried out, this skin can be glued back on if desired. I'm going to flip the wing over and do our carding. I like to have the face and the wing join at the forehead on a nice tight fit. And now once your major preening is done, then you can go on to carding the wing. I use a lot of clamps like these to hold the carding down. Secondaries or tertiaries around. They're forming the bottom of the war bonnet. I do like to use some painter's tape. It comes off easily. Doesn't leave a sticky residue. Well, this concludes the tube mounting method for a warbird mount. Watch my video of the boneless method, part 1, continued, for an alternative skinning and mounting technique.